The air inside the Pacific Heights Gourmet Market was as cold and sterile as an operating room. Fluorescent lights gleamed off polished marble floors and perfectly stacked pyramids of imported goods, each item a silent testament to a world of effortless wealth. The only sounds were the rhythmic, impersonal beeps of checkout scanners and the whisper-quiet glide of shopping carts navigated by customers whose faces were masks of detached urgency. It was a place built on the illusion of perfection, a temple to consumerism, where human warmth was a foreign currency. The atmosphere was thick with a quiet, unspoken hierarchy, a stark dividing line between the affluent patrons who browsed with an air of entitlement and the nearly invisible employees who stocked the shelves, their own lives a stark contrast to the luxury they handled every day. Standing in the checkout line was William, a man who looked as if he had been sculpted from the very essence of this environment. At 32, he was the successful CEO of a tech startup and the heir to a family fortune, his status as palpable as the designer fabric of his blazer. A luxury watch peeked from his cuff, a subtle signal of his power, yet his expression was a portrait of chronic fatigue, his eyes holding a profound emptiness that no amount of success could fill. When his turn came, he placed a bottle of Napa Cabernet and artisanal cheese on the counter, items for another solitary evening. He reached into his pocket for his wallet, then another, and then another. A quiet panic began to bloom in his chest, a hot wave of shame washing over him as he realized it wasn't there. He was exposed, vulnerable, and utterly powerless. From a nearby aisle, where she was meticulously arranging jars of organic preserves, Chloe watched the scene unfold. At 21, she was an English major who spent her evenings stocking shelves to pay for tuition. Her simple store uniform a stark contrast to the curated elegance around her. Her face was free of makeup, and despite the exhaustion that shadowed her features, her eyes shone with a bright, contagious hope. She saw the man's controlled panic, the subtle clenching of his jaw, and the flush of embarrassment on his neck. Without a second thought, she stepped away from her task. She approached the counter timidly, her presence a soft interruption in the tense silence. In a voice barely above a whisper, she looked at the cashier, then at William, and said, "I can get this for him. Don't worry about it, sir." The words hung in the air, a simple, disarming offer of grace. William froze, the words hitting him with the force of a physical blow. He existed in a world of transactions, where every favor was a debt and every gesture had a calculated return. The idea of pure, unprompted kindness, especially from a young woman who clearly counted every dollar, was so foreign it felt like a glitch in his reality. He stared at her, stunned into silence, as she paid for his items with her own card. He finally found his voice, insisting he get her details to pay her back immediately. Chloe just offered a small, genuine smile. Just pay it forward sometime," she said, turning to leave. Her refusal to be reimbursed shattered the last of his cynicism. It's moments like this, isn't it? The ones that remind you of the good in people. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful accounts. He waited outside, leaning against the cold brick wall of the building. The night air, a sharp contrast to the artificial chill of the market. William felt like a stranger in his own skin, driven by an impulse he couldn't rationalize. For years, his life had been a meticulously planned sequence of goals and acquisitions, each one meant to solidify his position in a world that measured worth in stock prices and social connections. Yet, the simple, uncalculated kindness of a young woman had dismantled that entire structure in a single moment. He wasn't just waiting to pay her back, he was waiting for an answer to a question he didn't even know how to ask. He needed to understand the source of her light, hoping, perhaps, that some of it could illuminate the profound darkness he felt within himself. His world was built on transactions, and he was desperate to find something that wasn't for sale. When Chloe finally emerged, the weariness of her long shift was etched onto her face, yet her eyes still held that same spark of life. She looked surprised, almost startled, to see him standing there. He straightened up, feeling an uncharacteristic awkwardness as he tried to explain his presence. He once again offered her cash, more than enough to cover the small purchase, but she shook her head with a gentle finality. Her refusal wasn't defiant or proud, it was simple and honest, as if accepting the money would somehow tarnish the purity of the gesture. Defeated but more intrigued than ever, he changed his approach. He asked if he could buy her a coffee sometime, not as repayment, but as a genuine thank you. After a moment of hesitation, a small, tired smile touched her lips, and she agreed. It was a simple yes, but for William, it felt like a door opening to a world he had long forgotten existed. Their first meeting was at a small, unassuming cafe, far from the polished gleam of his usual haunts. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and old books, a comforting aroma that seemed to encourage genuine conversation. Here, away from the judgment of his world and the obligations of hers, Chloe began to share pieces of her story. She spoke of her passion for classic literature, of the characters in novels who felt more real to her than many of the people she met. She talked about her family, about the quiet sacrifices her parents made, and her own burning desire to give her younger siblings a future free from the financial anxieties that had shadowed her own childhood. Each word painted a picture of a life rich in love and purpose, a stark contrast to the gilded emptiness he knew so well. He listened, utterly captivated, feeling the walls of his own cynicism begin to crumble. As Chloe spoke, William found himself looking at his own life through a new, unflattering lens. He saw a man who had everything and felt nothing, a collection of achievements without a core of happiness. His friendships were alliances, his romantic relationships were arrangements, and his family legacy was a golden cage. He felt a wave of shame for the times he had looked down on people like her, people who worked with their hands and their hearts, assuming their lives were smaller than his. He realized with a painful clarity that she possessed a form of wealth he had never known, a deep, unshakable sense of self-worth derived not from what she owned, but from who she was. For the first time, he spoke of the suffocating pressure of his name, the loneliness that haunted his penthouse apartment, admitting a vulnerability he had never shown to another soul. This shift in his priorities did not go unnoticed. William began declining invitations to exclusive galas and cancelling late-night strategy sessions, his time now reserved for quiet evenings talking with Chloe. His circle of so-called friends, a ruthless pack of investors and social climbers, began to whisper. The snide remarks were first delivered as jokes, questioning his sudden interest in a grocery store clerk. They implied she was a gold digger, a clever opportunist playing a long game. The comments were designed to poison his mind, to pull him back into their cynical worldview, where every human connection had an angle. It's hard to watch someone be judged so unfairly, isn't it? When people's worth is measured by their job title instead of their character. If you believe in looking deeper, please subscribe. It helps us share more stories that challenge these prejudices. To truly understand Chloe, William knew he had to understand her world. She invited him to her family's apartment one Sunday for dinner. The space was small, filled with mismatched furniture and the lingering aroma of home-cooked food, but it radiated a warmth that his sterile mansion had never possessed. Laughter echoed in the narrow hallways. Photographs of graduations, birthdays, and family vacations covered every available surface, each one a testament to a life built on shared memories and unconditional love. He watched as Chloe interacted with her parents and siblings, their bond a seamless tapestry of affection and support. He was an outsider, dressed in clothes that cost more than their monthly rent. Yet they welcomed him with an openness that left him humbled and deeply moved. He was witnessing a form of richness he had never before encountered. The fragility of this newfound happiness was soon tested. Chloe's mother, who had been struggling with a chronic illness, took a turn for the worse. The medical bills, already a significant burden, began to mount into an insurmountable debt. Chloe tried to carry the weight of it all with a quiet strength, working extra shifts and taking on more tutoring jobs, but the strain was visible in the new shadows under her eyes. William saw her silent struggle, and his immediate instinct was to solve the problem the only way he knew how, by writing a check. He offered to cover all the medical expenses, no strings attached, but she adamantly refused. Her pride was not about ego, it was about dignity. She would not allow their relationship to become one of patronage, a transaction that would cheapen the genuine connection they had built. Her refusal left William feeling utterly powerless, a sensation he despised. His entire life, money had been his tool, his language, his solution to every problem. Now, faced with a situation where it was not only ineffective but unwelcome, he felt a profound frustration. He was being forced to confront the limitations of his own power and the shallowness of his resources. For the first time, he understood that true support wasn't about erasing problems with wealth. It was about standing beside someone in the midst of their storm. He had to learn a new way of giving, one that didn't involve his bank account. This was the beginning of his real transformation, the moment he started to understand that some of life's most important debts can't be paid with money. It's a powerful lesson to learn that the best help often has nothing to do with finances. Your subscription allows us to continue telling stories about these life-changing realizations. He began to show up in different ways. Instead of offering money, he offered his time and his presence. He would drive Chloe to the hospital for her mother's appointments, sitting with her in the sterile waiting rooms, offering a hand to hold when the news was difficult. He started bringing her family meals, carefully prepared by a chef but delivered by him, framing it as a simple gesture to ease their burden. He used his network not to throw money at the problem, but to find information. He made a call to a friend on the board of a major hospital and arranged for a top specialist to review her mother's case. Presenting it as a professional courtesy, he was extending a way to get a second opinion that respected their autonomy. He was learning to provide support that empowered rather than diminished. Through the crucible of this shared crisis, their bond was forged into something unbreakable. The late-night talks in the quiet cafe were replaced by hushed conversations in hospital corridors and on the front steps of her family's apartment building. It was in these moments of raw vulnerability that they truly found each other. He confessed the deep-seated fear that his life would amount to nothing more than a name on a building, a legacy of wealth without meaning. She, in turn, shared her terror of not being strong enough to hold her family together, of letting down the people who depended on her most. They were no longer a wealthy CEO and a grocery store clerk. They were just two people, stripped of their social armor, finding solace and strength in one another. However, as their connection deepened, the external pressures began to mount with greater force. The rumors of William's new relationship finally reached the ears of his formidable mother, a woman who viewed marriage as a merger and love as a strategic alliance. She orchestrated a casual meeting, inviting William and his new girlfriend for lunch at an exclusive country club. From the moment Chloe arrived, his mother's demeanor was a masterclass in polite, cutting disdain. She asked condescending questions about Chloe's little job and her modest ambitions, her every word a thinly veiled insult designed to put Chloe in her place. The message was clear and brutal. Chloe was not, and would never be, welcome in their world. The battle lines were being drawn, not just around William, but for his very soul. The encounter with his mother, which was intended to drive a wedge between them, had the opposite effect. It crystallized everything for William. Seeing Chloe endure the subtle cruelty with such quiet dignity and grace only amplified his admiration for her. He looked at his mother's perfectly manicured world of judgment and superficiality, and then looked at Chloe, who represented authenticity, empathy, and a strength his family could never comprehend. The choice became blindingly clear. This was no longer just about a relationship. It was about choosing the kind of man he wanted to be. He realized that standing with Chloe, even if it meant standing against the world he was born into, was the only path toward a life of meaning. He was ready for the fight, no matter the cost. The dining room in William's family home was less a room and more a museum exhibit on inherited wealth. A cavernous space with a long mahogany table polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the cold light of a crystal chandelier. His mother, Eleanor, sat at its head, a queen surveying her domain, her smile as sharp and brittle as the fine china. She directed a stream of polite, probing questions at Chloe, each one a delicate instrument designed to measure her background, her education, her ambitions. Chloe answered with a quiet, unshakable poise, her simple black dress a stark island of authenticity in a sea of calculated elegance. William sat beside her, a knot of tension tightening in his stomach with every carefully enunciated word from his mother. He could feel the purpose of this dinner like a change in air pressure. It wasn't an introduction, it was an interrogation. After the main course was cleared, Eleanor suggested she show Chloe the rose garden, a thinly veiled excuse to isolate her. Under the pale moonlight, surrounded by the scent of meticulously cultivated blossoms, the true purpose of the evening was revealed. Eleanor opened her clutch and produced a check, the paper a crisp white rectangle in the dim light. $100,000, she said, her voice smooth and devoid of emotion. A gift to help you get a proper start in life, to invest in your future, whatever that may be. The implication hung heavy and poisonous in the air, a future that would take her far away from William. It was a transaction, a cold, clean severance package for a relationship she considered a temporary, embarrassing lapse in her son's judgment. It was a test designed to prove her cynical belief that everyone, eventually, has a price. Chloe looked from the check in Eleanor's hand to the woman's impassive face. There was no anger in her eyes, only a profound, quiet sadness. She gently shook her head, making no move to take the offered money. "Thank you, Mrs. Prescott, but I can't accept this," she said, her voice steady. "What I did for your son that day, in the market, it wasn't an investment, it was just helping someone who looked like they needed it." She took a small breath, her gaze unwavering. "Naam, I was raised to believe that true poverty isn't about not having enough money. It's about not having enough kindness or empathy to share with other people. I'm not poor in the things that matter." Her words were a simple declaration of her values, a quiet but devastating rebuttal to a world that could only measure worth in dollars and cents. William had followed them, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. He stood in the shadows of the doorway, hearing every word. The sight of that check, the sound of his mother's transactional cruelty, and the quiet dignity of Chloe's response broke something open inside him. He stepped out into the moonlight, his presence immediately shifting the balance of power. He didn't look at his mother with the familiar mix of resentment and duty, but with the cold clarity of a stranger. "She's right," he said, his voice resonating with a strength he'd never used with his family. "For my entire life, you've taught me the value of everything, but the worth of nothing. The richness I've found with Chloe is something your money can't buy and your influence can't touch. This is over." He was no longer just defending her. He was declaring his own independence. The silence that followed William's declaration was absolute and final. It was the sound of a bridge being burned, of a lifetime of expectations turning to ash. Without another word, He took Chloe's hand, his touch a firm, protective anchor, and led her away from the rose garden and out of the house. As they walked into the cool night air, leaving the cold fortress of his past behind, a profound sense of peace settled over him. The battle he had been fighting within himself was finally over. He had faced his greatest fear, the disapproval of his family and the loss of his inheritance, and found it meaningless next to what he stood to gain. He looked at Chloe, her face illuminated by the passing streetlights, and saw not a woman he needed to save, but the person who had finally saved him. Their bond, tested by fire, was now unbreakable. Their life together was built not on the ruins of his past, but on a new foundation entirely. William divested himself from the empty obligations of his former life, trading the sterile silence of his penthouse for a warm, light-filled home that he and Chloe chose together. It was a space filled with books, the scent of coffee, and the easy sound of laughter, a home defined not by its square footage, but by the authenticity of the life lived within its walls. He found that the weight of his family name, which had once felt like a crushing burden, simply floated away, replaced by a sense of purpose he had never known. For the first time, he wasn't living up to an inheritance. He was building a legacy, one rooted in the simple, profound values Chloe had shown him were possible. His days were no longer measured in stock fluctuations, but in shared moments of genuine connection. The most significant change was concrete and far-reaching. William sold his considerable stake in the tech startup, liquidating the primary symbol of his old identity. With that capital, he and Chloe established a foundation dedicated to providing college scholarships for low-income youth, students who, like her, possessed immense talent but lacked the resources to pursue their dreams. Chloe became its heart and soul, her innate empathy guiding every decision. She didn't just review applications, she met with the students, listened to their stories, and championed their potential. William, in turn, used his business acumen not to amass more wealth, but to build an efficient and sustainable engine for change. He had traded the pursuit of profit for the pursuit of purpose, finding a satisfaction in empowering others that no corporate victory had ever provided. Their work became a quiet force for good, touching hundreds of lives. They attended graduations, received tearful letters of gratitude, and saw firsthand the ripple effect of their investment in human potential. William learned that true power wasn't about control or influence. It was about lifting others up, about using your privilege to create opportunities where none existed. He discovered a richness in seeing a young woman become the first in her family to graduate from medical school, or a young man launch a community project in his neighborhood that made his former life seem like a pale, colorless imitation of success. He had finally found a world where his resources could create something of lasting worth, something that couldn't be quantified on a balance sheet but was measured in futures transformed and dreams realized. Years later, now married Deng Day, they were leaving a small neighborhood theater when they passed a local grocery store. Through the window, they saw a young student at the register, her face flushed with embarrassment as she fumbled through her pockets, coming up short for her groceries. William and Chloe exchanged a knowing, gentle smile. Without a word, they walked inside together. As Chloe approached the student with a quiet offer of help, William stood back, watching the simple, beautiful act of kindness that had started everything for them. It was a perfect, unbroken circle. Seeing how one small gesture can echo through time and change lives forever is a powerful reminder of our shared humanity. If you want to continue seeing stories that celebrate this truth, please subscribe and help us keep these narratives alive.